Welcome back to our channel. Madison's hand froze on the doorknob, the cool brass biting into her palm as the scene before her unfurled with a surreal precision that made her stomach twist into knots. She had left the house less than an hour ago, the mundane familiarity of her own apartment still lingering on her skin, the warm embrace of her morning coffee, the lingering scent of her perfume clinging softly to her clothes, and the sense of routine, the illusion of control over her life. None of that mattered anymore. The moment she had stepped over the threshold of her own living room, the fragile veneer of trust she had cultivated within these walls shattered like glass under pressure. Chelsea was there, in her home, in a posture so intimate that even Madison's trained mind could not dismiss it as an innocent gesture. A man tall, unfamiliar, and impossibly composed held Chelsea close. The way Chelsea leaned against him, the casual, unguarded tilt of her head, the ease with which her hand rested on his chest, all screamed betrayal. Madison's eyes darted to the minutiae of the room, the half-finished glass of wine on the table, still warm from her recent pour, her own jacket carelessly tossed over the edge of the sofa, a silent witness to the intrusion. The living room, once a sanctuary of familiarity and comfort, had been transformed into a stage of deception, each detail conspiring against her sense of reality. Her body reacted before her mind could rationalize. A cold rigidity took over, her muscles taut, as though the very act of breathing demanded discipline. She stepped back, careful not to disturb the floorboards or alert the occupants to her presence, closing the door with barely a whisper. Yet her eyes, sharp, crystalline, and unyielding, betrayed a spark that neither retreat nor concealment could mask. It was not just anger. It was an ignition, a silent and formidable flame of calculated reckoning. Madison's thoughts raced, colliding with each other in chaotic torrents. How long had this been going on? How much had she been blind to? Every laugh shared with Chelsea, every private conversation, every trust she had extended now felt like fuel for a fire she hadn't realized she'd been stoking herself. Anger surged in tandem with disbelief, carving deep channels of icy resolve into her chest. She wanted to confront, to scream, to reduce the walls of this house and the distance between them to rubble, but a deeper, more dangerous part of her recognized the value of patience. There would be a reckoning, precise and devastating. The internal battle was relentless. Part of her yearned for immediate confrontation, a raw display of fury to make the betrayal tangible, visible. Yet another part, sharper, colder, recognized the strategic advantage in silence, in observing, in letting the unsuspecting conspirators reveal themselves further. Every movement they made, every slight shift in posture, every careless gesture of the stranger or Chelsea herself could be catalogued, stored, and weaponized. The meticulous Madison, the one who valued control and foresight, began constructing a lattice of possibilities, calculating the repercussions of each choice with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Chelsea remained oblivious to the storm just beyond the closed door, caught in a tangled web of intimacy and secrecy. She was unaware not only of Madison's presence but of the seismic rupture that the knowledge of her actions would unleash. Her body relaxed, her expression serene, yet beneath that ease lay layers of unconscious guilt, a tension that had been building for weeks, perhaps months. Even in her ignorance, the decisions she had made, moments of vulnerability, lapses of judgment, clandestine meetings, were creating a chain of consequences that threatened to obliterate everything she had known. The irony of comfort in betrayal was not lost, even if unrecognized. The man in Chelsea's arms was another variable altogether. His composure suggested control, but Madison's mind dissected every movement, every glance, interpreting intent and consequence. Who was he, really? What were his motives? Was this manipulation, seduction, or opportunistic conquest? Each possibility twisted the narrative further, entangling all three lives in a growing storm of suspicion, jealousy, and moral ambiguity. Madison's sense of betrayal extended not just toward Chelsea, but toward the entire intricate network of relationships she had built around trust and loyalty. The foundations were cracking. Madison retreated into the hallway, her pulse a rapid drumbeat against the cage of her ribs. She pressed her back to the wall, the doorknob still cold beneath her fingertips, and allowed herself a moment to breathe, not to calm, but to plan. In the silence of that corridor, the house became a chessboard. Every item, every detail, the wine glass, her jacket, the subtle scent of her perfume lingering on the stranger's coat, became a piece in a strategic puzzle of revelation and retribution. She could strike now, impulsively, and the consequences would be explosive. Or she could wait, gather intelligence, expose every layer of deception, and ensure the betrayal's impact was both total and irreversible. The room behind the door seemed alive, throbbing with secrets and lies. Madison's mind conjured scenarios: a confrontation that ended in tears and implausible apologies, a public exposure that would shame and humiliate, a private reckoning that left bonds irreparably fractured. She considered the psychological implications as well: Chelsea's shock, the stranger's arrogance or guilt, the intricate play of perception and manipulation. Each thread had to be weighed, because one wrong move could transform the revelation from empowerment to catastrophe. Within her, another battle brewed. She hated herself for the intensity of her fury, for the jealousy that flared even as betrayal burned, for the desire to punish that coexisted with a deep longing to understand. She had always valued honesty and loyalty, yet now she confronted the painful irony that those principles could coexist with deception, that love could exist alongside duplicity. The contradiction gnawed at her, forcing self-examination even as the external threat became more pressing. Madison's internal landscape had become a battlefield, her every decision a skirmish between rationality, vengeance, and moral calculus. As the minutes dragged, the tension thickened. Madison observed subtle cues: a brush of Chelsea's fingers along the stranger's arm, a shift in posture that suggested complicity, a sigh that might betray a flicker of guilt. Each micro-movement provided Madison with ammunition, insight, and leverage. She recognized that immediate action might not be necessary. The situation was already unraveling, and the moment for maximum impact would arrive when the stakes were greatest. Her anger, once raw and uncontrolled, had transformed into a lethal precision, honed by careful observation and internal discipline. The cognitive and emotional weight pressed down with a suffocating intensity. Madison considered the implications for trust, friendship, and identity. How many moments had been authentic? How many gestures, smiles, confidences, and shared vulnerabilities had been tainted by deception? Every memory had to be reassessed. The intimate, familiar spaces of her home, once sanctuaries, now seemed alien and threatening, each object potentially imbued with evidence of infidelity and betrayal. Even her own presence felt dislocated, as though she were both observer and participant in a tragedy unfolding within her own domain. The stranger's face remained unreadable, an enigma of confidence and subtle manipulation. Madison dissected every line, every shadow, every expression, reconstructing possible motives. Was he opportunistic? Dangerous? Charming with concealed malice? Each possibility intensified her vigilance, sharpening the edge of her internal storm. She could not allow the narrative to proceed unchecked. Every detail could become a weapon in her arsenal of retaliation and revelation. Madison's resolve solidified. She would not allow this moment to pass unmarked. There would be consequence, calculated and unavoidable. Yet, alongside determination, a deep moral tension remained: how much destruction could be justified in the pursuit of justice? Could she navigate the fine line between righteous anger and personal ruin? Each choice was weighted with potential for irreversible damage, for emotional carnage that might extend far beyond the immediate betrayal. The internal struggle, the push and pull between control and chaos, became a crucible forging a new level of strategic thinking, emotional fortitude, and psychological acuity. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, but the sense of suspense did not diminish. Madison's patience was a weapon, her silence a declaration of intent. Behind the closed door, Chelsea and the stranger remained unaware, their actions unwittingly building the framework for the ultimate confrontation. Madison imagined the scene in multiple permutations: revelations public and private, confrontation immediate and delayed, consequences social, legal, and emotional. Each scenario demanded careful analysis, each potential outcome increased the psychological stakes, and each decision carved a deeper layer of tension into the narrative. Madison's reflection in the hallway mirror caught her eye. The eyes staring back were no longer simply hers, they were alert, calculating, and dangerous. Within them glimmered the recognition that betrayal, while momentary, could ignite enduring consequences. The juxtaposition of her vulnerability and her emerging strategic power created an inner tension that both excited and terrified her. The path forward would require audacity, cunning, and psychological insight, balancing the desire for immediate vengeance against the long-term impact of her actions. By nightfall, Madison had reconstructed the psychological terrain of the house and everyone within it. Chelsea's patterns, the stranger's gestures, the objects strewn in familiar places all now existed within a lattice of potential leverage, exposure, and retribution. The home, once a haven, had transformed into a theater of potential reckoning. Madison's mind orchestrated possibilities with cold precision, ensuring that when the moment came, her actions would maximize both truth and impact, leaving no ambiguity about betrayal, culpability, or consequence. In the quiet darkness, Madison's heartbeat slowed, not in fear, but in readiness. The room behind the door, the warmth of the wine, the scent of her abandoned jacket, and the intimacy of Chelsea's indiscretion became instruments in a complex symphony of revelation. The first flicker of danger in her eyes had evolved into a strategic brilliance, a readiness for action that combined emotional clarity with psychological acuity. Every step she had taken, every moment of observation, every mental simulation, prepared her for the reckoning she would deliver not impulsively, but with careful, inevitable precision. The tension remained unbearable. Every breath, every microsecond, was an interval of calculation, anticipation, and latent fury. The narrative had shifted irrevocably, trust had fractured, innocence had eroded, and the ordinary had been rendered extraordinary by betrayal. Madison was both witness and arbiter, poised to transform the quiet deceit into a confrontation that would redefine relationships, alter perceptions, and leave consequences etched into the lives of everyone involved. The dangerous brilliance in her eyes, the silent mastery of patience and observation, foreshadowed a storm that was imminent, inescapable, and devastatingly precise. In that moment, Madison became the embodiment of cold fury, strategic calculation, and moral tension, the culmination of betrayal's psychological weight. The stage was set, the players unaware, and the consequences of her forthcoming action would ripple far beyond the walls of the familiar home. Her story was now defined not by the betrayal she witnessed, but by the choice of how she would respond, and the reckoning, when it came,